Welcome to Habeas Treasures, where I try to decipher this book, There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black, in order to find one of the 5 hidden treasures. On today's episode, I'll continue my breakdown of The Lion's Share Box, and discuss one possible way to interpret the How to Read This Book section to find potential clues. Let's begin! On a previous video, I discussed why I thought Jon purposely used the line, "On the other hand, if you're eagerly waiting for me to shut the hell up and get to the part about how you can source this book for clues that will lead you to the location of the largest treasure box, then let's get to it." The phrase, "shut the hell up," seems out of character compared to the rest of the treasure book, so in my mind, this makes it likely a clue. I hypothesize that it's a clue potentially leading us to the Bible, since one way to shut hell up is to follow the lessons taught in the Bible. And we know that Jon grew up in a religious household with deeply religious parents, so he likely has a strong familiarity with the different books and chapters and verses in the Bible that he could potentially use as clues. And for centuries, people have used the Bible to encode clues in secret messages and even movies like the first Mission Impossible film starring Tom Cruise and the Book of Job. Okay, so where am I going with this? Well, after putting out that video, I realized that Jon might be confirming the use of the Bible in this earlier passage from the How to Read This Book section. He writes, "On occasion, to help illustrate a theme, I share a personal anecdote about myself or others who played a part in this project. I hope these stories add color to the larger mural here. My initial instinct was to keep myself out of the way as much as possible, as this book is not meant to be a personal memoir. Still, I realize some readers, especially those who want to find the 5 treasure boxes, may be interested to learn more about me or the events that led to the treasure hunt. Perhaps you are curious too." The line that stuck out to me was, "My initial instinct was to keep myself out of the way as much as possible, as this book is not meant to be a personal memoir." Anytime JCB uses the words "my initial," it makes me wonder if he's referring to his actual initials, JCB, as a clue. Or, since most of the stories he tells in the book are about himself from when he was much younger, before he changed his name and added the black on the end, maybe it's his initials of JC that we're supposed to be looking for. Now, obviously there's another famous person who also has the initials JC and is associated with the Bible, and that's Jesus Christ. And I guess from a certain angle, one could consider the Bible a personal memoir of Jesus' life. Who knows if this is correct? But it's possible, since this passage about the initials leads directly into the line about shutting the hell up. So maybe these 2 paragraphs in the How to Read This section of the book are pointing us towards using the Bible to help lead us to the location of the largest treasure box. Okay, so what else have I found in the How to Read This book section that I think is interesting? Let's take a look at this passage. On a semi-final note, you don't have to be a genius to solve the location of any treasure box. At least I don't think you do. I'm not a genius, so creating some complex cipher or grand secret code is beyond my scope. The attributes you need to find our treasure are really many of the ones illustrated through the chapters in this book. Learn from these stories, maybe even apply their teachings, and you will be well on your way. Do not put undue pressure on yourself to be perfect. Have fun. You won't need to understand every clue or hint to bring together the full picture. Okay, there's a lot here. So let's start with the mention of the word genius twice. He also suggests that we shouldn't put undue pressure on ourselves. So I looked up which genius in history is associated with pressure, and I discovered the scientist, inventor, philosopher Blaise Pascal from the 1600s, whose last name Pascal is now used as a unit of pressure. 1 Pascal equals 1 Newton of force applied per square meter. Now, I don't think this fact is needed to find the treasure. However, I immediately liked Pascal as a possible clue for a number of reasons, starting with his first name, Blaise, which is very on brand for a treasure hunt. There's even a chapter in the treasure book that's subtitled Blaze the Path. So far, so good. What else? Well, the other reason I liked Pascal as a possible clue is in this same passage, JCB writes, "Do not put undue pressure on yourself to be perfect." This coupled with the genius line, reminded me of the 2022 movie The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage and, get this, Pedro Pascal. The movie, in addition to being very funny, spawned this popular meme. Here's how the internet describes it. A scene in which Pascal's character looks at a gruff and irritated Cage with a grin on his face while driving under the influence of LSD would spawn another internet meme. It is commonly used humorously when two parties are in stark disagreement or conflict with each other over a topic in an exaggeratingly emotional fashion, and is paired with the 1969 Mama Cass song, Make Your Own Kind of Music. That's right, the song that JCB highlights in the semi-final chapter of the book is the same one that makes this meme so funny. Coincidence? I'm not so sure, and here's why. Another thing that Pascal is famous for is the Pascal triangle of mathematical numbers that's named after him. Mathematicians have been using this triangle for a number of things, including probability theory and determining the coefficients of binomial expansion. Now, I put that last part in just to sound smart, but I think this triangle could be important for a couple of reasons. First is that many people have pointed out that the author seems to be highlighting triangular numbers with the score of the basketball game in the Michael Jordan chapter. And the Pascal triangle is obviously a triangle made up of numbers. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Yo, HT, isn't the Pascal triangle different from the triangular numbers that were discovered by the ancient Pythagoreans? Great question. And yes, the two mathematical concepts are different. However, get this, the triangular number sequence is actually part of the Pascal triangle. Here, let me show you. The triangular numbers from the basketball game appear in this diagonal of the Pascal triangle. It's one of the many things that the Pascal triangle is used for, identifying triangular numbers. Who knew? Okay, what else? Well, if by now your spidey sense is tingling about the prospect of Blaise Pascal being a treasure theme, you are not alone. It turns out that all the recent Spider-Man movies were produced by Pascal Pictures. That's right. Pascal Pictures is the movie production company behind such hits as Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, Spider-Man Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. Actually, I made that last one up. But Pascal Pictures did also produce Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But wait, there's more. I think there's a chance that Pascal is also related to some of the other chapter topics in the book. For instance, Pascal is synonymous with the holiday of Easter. That's right, the 3 days around Easter are called the Pascal Triduum. These are the days where Christians recall the passion, crucifixion, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Historically, children who are born around Easter are often named Pascal as a result. Another fun fact. I think this could be one of the reasons why JCB includes the Here Comes Peter Cottontail song and story in Chapter 9. Okay, what else? Well, earlier I mentioned that Blaise Pascal was a famous mathematician. In addition to the Pascal triangle, he is credited with discovering modern probability theory. Basically, he was the first person to calculate the probability of winning something or finding something. This reminded me of all the probability and possibility talk in Chapter 16 about the Atlanta Olympics. The subtitle of the chapter is Defy Expectations and starts off with this passage. When a person asks me, do you think I can locate the treasure? I answer, why not? Someone's going to. Sounds a bit like trying to calculate the probability of finding the treasure. Very Pascal-like. Then, JCB goes into the example about how lucky we all are by writing, regardless, people defy probabilities all the time. Heck, it's a miracle you and I are alive at all. Out of the millions of hopeful sperm, you were the result of that one tiny fortunate cell which passed through the barrier to entry ahead of all the rest. Chapter 16 is chock full of probability talk and overcoming the odds, which in my mind makes it another potential nod to Pascal. Okay, so just to recap, we have the basketball scores in the Michael Jordan chapter, possibly connecting to the Pascal triangle. We then have the confirmation bias chapter Easter Pascal song connection, and then the Nigerian soccer chapter, which is probability heavy and could connect to Pascal's pioneering work with calculating the odds of winning. Okay, that's a lot, but it turns out there could be even more. If we go back to the how to read this book section, right before JCB makes the possible Pascal reference to Spidey sense, he gives this advice. The first thing I would advise is to read this book once through thoughtfully. Pascal, in addition to being a famous mathematician and scientist, is also known for his work in philosophy. And just like the treasure book, he is known for having some pretty insightful quotes. One of his best-known quotes is, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." This quote is from a book of his philosophy that was published after his death called Pensées, which in French means thoughts. I think this could be the book that JCB is making a side reference to when he suggests we should read the treasure book once through thoughtfully. On a hunch, I decided to see if Pascal had ever used any of his mathematical acumen to come up with any ciphers that might apply to the treasure. After all, if Pascal is the genius that JCB is referring to in the How to Read This Book section, then maybe he's the genius that came up with the complex cipher or grand secret code that could unlock the hunt. Well, sadly, the only thing I could find connecting Pascal to ciphers was this quote from his book Pensées, where he writes, "The Old Testament is a cipher." Coincidence? I don't know. But you have to ask yourself, what's the probability of that? Anyway, that's all I've got for today's video. I hope you found it interesting and that it helps you with your hunt.